Democracy depends on your voice, your courage, and your peaceful, I'll say that again, peaceful participation. Stand tall, speak up, and remember that no troops, no weapons, no show of force is stronger than united communities that refuse to yield our rights. Chicago will not succumb to threats, and Cook County will not be silenced. I'd like to welcome to the podium the Attorney General of the State of Illinois, Kwame Raoul.
Thank you, Madam President, Governor, Mr. Mayor, and Lieutenant Governor. I'd like to repeat something the Governor said. We cannot, and not anybody in this room can be dumbed down to believing that any of this is normal. President Trump has been utilizing the notion that he and he alone can deal with crime in American cities, and his preferred tool in doing so is the American military. The problem with this approach is that it's both bad strategy and illegal. I won't deny any day that we do have a serious crime problem in Chicago, as do American cities throughout the nation, in red states and in blue states. Recent mass shootings and reports of other crime are horrific. While Chicago's crime problem is serious, it is far from the worst in the country. President Trump's approach of using the military is bad strategy because the National Guard is not trained to do local crime fighting. Furthermore, the use of the National Guard as a crime-fighting force is simply not sustainable. It is further bad strategy because there has been no effort by the president to collaborate with local leaders or local law enforcement. Collaboration and a comprehensive approach is critical to successful crime fighting. Since the outset of my tenure as Attorney General, I and other local law enforcement partners have worked closely with federal law enforcement partners, including the FBI, DEA, ATF, Secret Service, and others, to investigate and prosecute criminal activity in Illinois. This one-team approach to fighting crime, utilizing combined intelligence, experienced, well-trained agents and officers, and state-of-the-art technology has yielded great results. It, combined with the investment in community violence interruption and providing for victims of crime, has led to a significant reduction in crime. If President Trump wanted to contribute to fighting crime in Chicago, he would steer more resources to these federal agencies that are collaborating with local law enforcement instead of dramatically cutting their budget. If President Trump were serious about fighting crime, he would not be cutting funding to proven community violence interruption efforts. If President Trump were serious about fighting crime, I would not have to have sued him 2 weeks ago, sued the Department of Justice 2 weeks ago for threatening to deprive resources for victims of crime based on unrelated immigration criteria. If President Trump were serious about fighting crime, he would not enter into collusive settlement to put machine gun trigger reset back out onto the street, devices back out onto the streets. President Trump's plan is not only bad strategy, but it is illegal. The militia clauses of the United States Constitution give Congress sole authority to decide the circumstances that allow the president to federalize the National Guard. The 10th Amendment preserves state sovereignty to enforce state laws as they see fit. As recognized by Judge Charles Breyer today in California, the Posse Comitatus Act limits the federal government's ability to use the military for domestic law enforcement. Although the president does have limited, and I repeat, limited authority to deploy the National Guard to help federal law enforcement in specific circumstances, none of these circumstances exist in Chicago. We are not being invaded by a foreign nation. There is no rebellion against the federal government as there was on January 6th. There does not exist an inability to enforce federal law in Chicago. Federal courts are open. Federal criminal cases are being prosecuted and investigated every day. And as I mentioned, federal criminal investigations in collaboration with local law enforcement are taking place on a daily basis. The president has failed to establish that any of these prerequisites required by Congress through the Posse Comitatus Act exists. Let's be clear. The president's plan is not about fighting crime. It's purely performative. He wants to demonstrate a show of military force towards American citizens as we would only see in authoritarian countries like China, North Korea, or Russia. He is hoping to sow chaos by inciting out-of-control protests. Chicago, we have demonstrated that we can protest peacefully. It is imperative that we do not take the bait. Exercise your First Amendment rights, but do so peacefully without violence or destruction of property. I invite folks to visit my website, illinoisattorneygeneral.gov, and review free guidance before you participate in protests. This administration frequently disregards our Constitution and federal law. In fact, the president has even questioned whether he has to comply with our Constitution. But we are here to say that no president can flout the Constitution, not here in Illinois. In Illinois, we care about the rule of law, and we intend to preserve it. As Governor Pritzker already said, there is no emergency in Chicago. I've been in touch with the governor's office and the City of Chicago Corporation Council, and we will not hesitate to take action to protect our residents if this administration breaks the law or violates our Constitution. And with that, I'd like to pass the mic to our Lieutenant Governor.